Ever since the release of Crusader Kings 2, Paradox Interactive has adopted a DLC policy revolving around releasing small pieces of content. These pieces of content are based around fleshing out one single aspect of the game. This can range from CK2's DLC unlocking playable factions, such as Muslims, or to EU4's DLC, such as Mare Nostrum, which adds simple features such as Condottieri. These DLC packs tend to be accompanied by cosmetic DLC, such as music and unit graphics, and a free patch. The free patch's content tends to be about half of what you get out of the DLC. Each DLC adds a few new features with one major hook. In the newest EU4 DLC, for instance, the hook is this Great Powers feature, which is basically a similar system to what was in Victoria 2. The Crusader Kings 2 Concave DLC added a hook which was the new council system. These DLCs revolved around these features while adding a couple of periphery features. The DLC system that Paradox uses slowly expands the breadth of the systems in these games, but not necessarily the depth of the games. A real issue with periodically putting out patches that all intend to add at least one game-changing system is feature bloat. This is a system that you see happen a lot in these early access games, where they start with a really core, basic system that works to a reasonable extent, and then they keep adding a bunch of features that kind of don't mesh too well with each other. Let's just look at some of the different systems that have been added to EU4 over its lifespan. We've got Development, Great Powers, Random New World, Colonial Nations, Naval Missions, Condottieri, and Estates. If you think about each of these features, you'll notice that they don't really interact with each other too much. They all kind of stand on their own and do their own thing. You can easily do Development and not really have to have the naval missions affecting it at all, or Estates don't really have much to do with the Great Powers feature. There's a couple of events that link a few of them. For instance, if you have estates in a certain development region, you might get an event relating to that. But aside from that, there's no real core systematic link between these two features. I believe that this lack of linking is because of the modular nature of the DLC. The modular nature of the DLC means that you can't really plan for the DLCs to interact with each other, because someone might not have all the DLCs. If you're implementing a new feature that heavily relies on a previous one, this would mean that the player would have to go out and buy 2 DLCs. And this isn't something that they really want. They want these DLCs to be modular, so you can just go out and buy Art of War if that's the only one you want. So let's look at this in particular. Let's compare estates with parliaments and constitutional monarchies and the factions of Ming. Each of these areas all basically do the same thing. They relate to different areas of influence inside your nation, impacting how it works. You can even tell this because they've removed estates from factions with Ming, and parliaments and constitutional monarchies don't have one of the 3 factions available to them. This means that it's clear that these things have an interaction and operate in basically the same area, but they don't do the same thing because they're all tied to different DLC. With each DLC, the oceans of possibility in the game space gets way wider. You can do way more things. Implementing estates, for instance, added something that we were never able to do before. However, it doesn't add to the depth of the other systems. Combat is still basically the same as it ever was when it came out. Art of War changed some things up, and of course we got a few patches that changed it around, but the general idea hasn't gotten too much more complicated. Now if we compare the current DLC practice with the older expansion model, used in games such as Victoria 2 or StarCraft 2, we can see that there was quite a different way in the way these were developed. These games have 2 or 3 major expansions that add large amounts of content to different areas. An expansion in this game equates to about the content of 3 DLCs in the newer Paradox games, including the free features that come with it. Because of this, the expansion ends up with a larger amount of content being created in conjunction with each other. This means that the design document of an expansion includes far more features than the design document of a DLC. Now, because of this, it means they're considering the ways that these different features can interact with each other on a much grander scale. Each DLC seems to be fairly thought up on its own. It's very modular, like I said earlier. They don't really think about what they're going to do to the next one until it comes out. Because of this means that these features don't link together. But if you do it in an expansion, these features are all going to link together in such a way that means that they can increase depth, reduce redundant features, and also make sure that game elements are very much working together with each other, not grinding against each other, and not simply doing something that a different feature uses elsewhere. The fact that expansions are only like 3 major ones means you don't need as many game-changing features as well. For instance, if you've got the 3 DLCs, you'll need 3 game-changing features to make them worthwhile. If you have one expansion, you might only need 1 or 2 game-changing features, and you can spend a lot more development time on the smaller, less focused on aspects of the game. You might be able to work on or add a feature that's not very flashy, but adds way more depth. If you have the smaller DLC expansion, it's much harder to do this because you've got to spend more time on the big flashy features, and not really thinking about how you add to the depth of the gameplay. So overall, both models have their own strengths. Smaller DLC means you get more frequent updates, and it means you can kind of pick and choose what you want. But with expansions, you get far more cohesive feature lists. All the systems work together in a better way. And because you got larger, more amounts of content in one go, it means that everything's going to be designed at the same time and kind of feel very synergetic. I know, personally, I've got far more value out of StarCraft's expansions than I've ever got it out of any of E4's post-Art of War DLC combined.